Hello and welcome to Hyperproduction with me, Rory. In this episode, I'm going to be giving you top 5 EQ tips that you need to know, so stay tuned. Okay, so here are top 5 tips that you should know about EQ. So up at number 1 is know your frequencies. What I mean by knowing your frequencies is understanding which frequencies within the audio spectrum relate to certain elements within the track. Now, I think this is going to be easily explained via our cheat sheet that we've made. So let's head over and have a look. So here's our EQ cheat sheet. This is going to be able to explain a little bit better about what we mean by knowing your frequencies. So anything of 20 hertz and below is impossible to detect. So you want to put a low cut here, as it does add unwanted energy and doesn't leave much headroom within your track, and you can't even hear it, so get rid of it. At 60 hertz and below, this is your sub bass, but only enough to feel and you can't really hear. However, at 80 to 100 hertz, you can feel and hear the sub bass. 100 and 120 hertz, this is your low end punch that comes from here. This is ideal for kicks, especially coming over a club sound system. 200 hertz and below, this is known as the bottom end. 250 hertz, a notch filter here can help make the bass seem more present within the mix. Between 150 and 400 hertz, this is where your boxiness comes from. Cut here to help contrast the bottom end and the mid. 200 hertz to 1.5 kilohertz, this is your low end punch, your fatness, and also the area where it adds impact to your low end also. Between 800 hertz and 4 kilohertz, this is known as the mids. This is your clarity, harshness, and also defines the tonality between various instruments. 4500 hertz, otherwise known as 4.5 kilohertz, this is extremely tiring to the ears. Definitely add a notch filter here to prevent ear fatigue. Between 5 and 7 kilohertz, this is where de-essing typically happens, mainly on vocals, but can be applied to many other instruments and elements as well. Between 4 and 9 kilohertz, this is your brightness, your presence, and a lot of sibilance from vocals. Also your high-end distortion as well. Between 6 and 15 kilohertz, this is your air and presence. Boost between these frequencies to add that nice bit of shimmer to the end. Between 9 and 15 kilohertz, boosting will certainly add sparkle and shimmer to your mix, and cutting will smooth the harshness as well. So up next at number 2 is MidSide Processing. This is the ability to process the 2 streams of information coming out of your speakers. So the mono information, i.e. the mid, or the stereo information, i.e. the side. Within Logic's new update of 10.3.2, they enabled this option to be available within their stock EQ plugin under dual mono mode. So as you can see here, we can attenuate the left and the right channels, but by clicking this gear icon and then heading down to mid side and then clicking on mid to take you back to the main window, we can then process the mono and the stereo information, i.e. the mid and the side. Now, why would you want to do this? Well, there are a number of reasons as to why you'd want to do it. So if you're attenuating the side, i.e. the stereo, it can help bring a bit of depth and dimension to certain elements. With the mono, i.e. the mid, you are then concentrating that certain element into a mono field. So if you're processing bass, you can then set the lower end information to be mono and then keep the stereo or the side information super wide. That will then give a feeling that your bass is super wide, but then you are keeping the low end mono, which will then keep it nice and tidy within the mix. So then you reduce or completely eliminate any phasing issues. Up next at number 3 is don't cut or boost too much. The reason that you're wanting to EQ certain elements is to try and get them to fit in the track as subtly as possible. When you start doing big sweeping curves like this or like that, then you're going to be drastically changing the sound of that element. The reason you picked it in the first place is because you like the sound of it. So EQ is there to be as transparent as possible to enhance the sound of that particular sample or synth preset or whatever you want to use. So just make sure you use it stringently and don't be a bit overzealous with it, because then you are changing the full sound of it and the timbre essentially. Up next at number 4 is match EQ. Otherwise known as reference EQing. This is the ability to read a EQ curve from another element and match it to the current element you're processing. This is extremely helpful, especially in the mid frequencies when you have a lot of stuff clashing. You can then fit it in like a jigsaw and then flip the match EQ to then fit in with the other element. So I'll show you quickly here. So you just pick another element. So let's say we've got synth wet. So we're currently on an effect here. Then we click learn and it will learn that curve from that particular element. So the other element. And then once we click that, we go on match, and then you can see it's matched the EQ curve of what that other element is doing. And we simply drag this down and then flip it. So the reason we flip it is because then we're doing the opposite of what that other element is actually doing. So you can understand as to why it's then going to fit in. But do be very careful with this and don't be too overzealous with the minus there, because then you are boosting some certain frequencies. So just use it very gently and it will make things fit in perfectly. Up next at number 5 is low cut everything. Obviously not to the same extent as kick drums, you probably want to be low cutting around 60 hertz, but things like hi-hats you do want to low cut as well, which you might not expect, and I'll tell you why. Every element and every sample and every synth will always have some degree of low end information. This is all counting up and amounting to the overall headroom that you're left with at the end of your mix. So for example, if we have a look at the hi-hats here and we turn up the volume on the EQ, you can see that it's revealing a lot more low-end information here. So just to be on the safe side, it's well worth just low cutting all the way up to that peak, and then you will be good to go. Then you definitely know that nothing has a low-end rumble to it at all, especially things like a live hi-hat from an acoustic drum kit that's been recorded. When you hit the cymbal, it's obviously going to travel through the stand and through the floor. So when you start thinking like that, you can understand why the mics will pick up some low-end resonance. This is also quite handy for clearing up your mix. So if you have a particularly muddy mix, do this through all your elements, and I guarantee that you will have a slightly clearer sounding mix. So just to recap, at number 1 we had know your frequencies, understanding which frequencies relate to certain elements within the track. Number 2, mid-side EQ, understanding the difference between mono and stereo information. Number 3, don't boost or cut too much. You want to make it seem as transparent as possible to nicely fit within your mix. Number 4, match EQ, helping clashing elements within the middle frequencies. And number 5, low cut everything to totally eliminate unwanted low-end information. And there we have it, top 5 EQ tips that you should know and now know. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to leave any comments in the comment section below. Please don't forget to subscribe and give this video a big thumbs up. Also, don't forget to go and join our mailing list over at www.hyperproduction.com to find out when we launch our brand new website. We're really excited to show you and we can't wait to spill the beans on that. So I've been Rory, thank you very much for watching.